Okay, it's what? It's January 18th. January 18th, 2005.
Right.
Right, okay. And Everett, we're going to talk, you were talking about when you first,
Came to Philipsburg.
which was in the 50s.
59.
Now why don't you start, could you give us your full name and date of birth, just for the record?
Everett Miller, May 16th, 1921.
Let's talk,
Well-
we got an hour here, so maybe we could talk about the 50s and what you...
Well, in the 50s,
Go ahead. If you're gonna move, I want to keep a... Yeah, that's good.
when I came in December of 1959, it wasn't the first time I'd been in Montana. I'd worked in Montana 3 years, 52, 53, and 54. At that time, I was employed by the Bureau of Land, Bonneville Power Administration. And my job was to appraise the power lines running from, the first was from the Hungry Horse Dam, and it went to Seattle, Washington. And then after the Hungry Horse, I spent a summer appraising the land behind the Libby Dam, which also I started appraising right away from there to the coast. The Libby Dam went mostly to Lower Washington and Portland, and also to the power to plants in Spokane.
So Philipsburg was just a new destination for you?
Afterwards. This was in 52, 53, and 54. Then
Watch that mic, you got the mic on there.
I would spend 6 months in the field and 6 months in the office and in court, because Bonneville had so many lines during the war years. They had not appraised. They didn't have appraisers, and they just condemned it. So those lines I had to do too. Some of those lines ran as far as California, which they were built in around 54. But I appraised those, and it would take 6 months to walk from, say, from the Libby to Seattle, and then, as I say, I spent my time in court after that, and had a lot of good experiences in court. I kind of got to liking that after a while. You met so many people. Some people who had money, and you went across their land, they had hired high-powered lawyers to try to get more money out of the government, and so it was my job to defend the government, and that's what I did. I remember one case, and I knew this lady. She lived on the Willamette River, and we went across her property, and she was a very wealthy lady. So she showed up in court, and I didn't hardly recognize her. I thought she'd been down to our thrift shop or somewhere and bought a lot of real bad clothes, and she had 2 little children with her. Now, this lady didn't say that those were her children, but they were little ragamuffins that she had drug in. And I told our attorney, I says, don't even try the case, settle it out of court. I said it'd be cheaper because that jury is with that in front of them. And this lady got up and she says, I don't have an attorney and I really don't know what it's worth, but it's got to be worth more than they're offering me. Of course, the jury gave her a nice settlement when it was about 3 times what it was worth.
Just for some theatrics.
Yeah, and there was a lot of interesting cases. I loved it when I had a high-powered attorney there cross-examining me, because I knew he knew nothing about timber or land. He knew law, but I had a case. Well, I wouldn't say I perjured myself, but in my own mind I do, because I could have said afterwards I really didn't know. And this was a case of where we went through some soft maple, big leaf maple, and so this attorney says to me, did you examine this maple to see if it was figured or not? Because figured maple's worth a lot of money. And he knew I hadn't, because we hadn't cut down the trees or sawed them up to see. So he had me there, so I thought a second, and then I thought, boy, I wonder just how much you know. So I looked at him and I said, no, sir. Boy, now he's all smiles, and he jumps up and, please tell the jury and the judge why you did not. Well, I says, there's no figured maple found this side of the Mississippi River. That's all, he said, that's all. So those were good experience. I stayed there with Bonneville until I had them caught up, which was my agreement with them. And
that was 54?
well, in 55. In fact, I worked until 56, the first of 56, to get all the cases out.
Most of those were tried in where? Federal court?
All in federal court.
In which district?
All districts where the federal court was. Portland, Washington, and I don't think I was on a case in Montana, but I might have been. But most of them were in either Spokane or Portland, according to where the property was located.
So to be clear, Everett, when during the war, Bonneville basically created these power lines.
Well,
and they did it so rapidly that they basically cut the timber, got the lines through, and then you had to go back after the fact and figure out what the timber that had been cut was worth anywhere from 5 to 10 years later?
Oh yes, maybe longer in some of it, because we needed that power for the shipyards, and we needed that power, so they used eminent domain on just blanket eminent domain, and went through it, and because we needed the power in World War II. Now, you wonder how you can appraise a power line where they've already cut it all off and dug out a lot of the stumps. And I had to think on that for a while. But the land on each side of the power line was mostly the same. So what I'd do, I'd take samples along each side of the power line and combine them and get an average total, and then use that acreage that was in the power line to figure out what it's worth. But it was a job, but I think it was fair, as fair as anybody could do it. Now, Libby Dam, that was all new power lines. And a lot of the Hunger Horse was. But the other dams, a lot of them that were constructed either prior to the World War II or afterwards, then those were just all condemned. So it was a lot of fun, and I saw a lot of country.
So we got you to 1955, and you're done with BPA.
Yeah.
We got to get you to Philipsburg now.
Okay, now I was sitting in the office. I went across to a company called Stebco. They're headquartered in Vancouver, Washington. I'd crossed 7 miles of their line and land, and I told them what was there, and made a deal with them that as a timber company, if they would log it, the government would pay for the logging and roads, which they agreed to, and this was in 54, latter part of 54 and 55, while Bill Culkin, the president of Stebco, came to see me in my office there in Portland, and he says, we want to hire you. And I said, well, Bill, I got a good job, and yeah, but he says, after we logged that and you told us how much was there, we couldn't believe that anybody could come out that close on, because it's not exact science cruising timber, so, but he says, you were in 2.5%, and he says, we want to hire you as our woods manager. So
Everett, could you explain just very briefly what it means to cruise timber to somebody who wouldn't understand?
Well, cruising timber, a tree has so many board feet of lumber in it. And a cruiser has to estimate, we always call it estimate, how many board feet in that tree. Well, we use a formula like a cylinder, and we take the diameter and the height of that tree, and then we can project how many board feet is in that. And we had tables that told us like a 30-inch tree, 2.5 logs high, which would be around 60 feet, would have 1,000 feet of lumber in it. And that's how you do it, but it's just natural.
Then you have to decide how many of what type tree are there per acre, and then
extrapolate. Oh, yeah, what you do is, I use a 1/4 acre sample plots. Now, I cruised every tree on that sample acre, or 1/4 acre, and then you'd take those, say you was going across a 40-acre tract, 1,320 feet, you'd take 8 of those plots across there, and that it would give you a 10-acre strip of, and you run a direct line, through it, and that's how you estimate the board feet of timber on any given ground. On a small plot like 40 acres, you would have to run 4 of those through there, 20% cruise. Half a section, I could do it on a 10% cruise and be within 5% accuracy.
So you did how many acres for them, and you were within less than 2%?
Oh gosh, I forget. It was a 7-mile stretch, 640 feet wide. And that would be 20-acre wide for 7 miles. But but I did miles and miles and miles of those. Well, I started out, I learned from the boss man how to cruise timber. That was Jim Gerard. And he used to be head of the Forest Service in the United States, and that man took me under swing after I got out of the service and taught me. I never had a chance to go to college or anything, but I learned from doing. And
So when you said you had a job you didn't want to leave, was that actually with the Forest Service or
No,
were you
with-
independent?
no, I was independent, but I was contracting with the Bureau of Land.
But you set up your own
All right.
business at a young age then?
No, I actually made a contract with Bonneville Power, Department of Interior, that I do their job so much. And that way I could work 7 days a week, and they paid me a salary and furnished everything. And so, but then Bill came and I went to work for them and ran theirs for Stebco for till '59.
That's STEBCO?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the mill was 20 years old, but when it was built, it was the most modern mill in the country. And no teepee burners or anything like that. Every bit of waste was used. The chips went to the paper mills, the bark went to the paper mills, and everything was used, so we had no waste.
What year was
Sawdust.
that built?
Well, it was 21 years old in '59. So it was built back then.
1938.
But they had big land holdings, and I bought a lot more timber and land for them while I was with them. And we had to decide either to build a new mill or get rid of it. So I made some calculations, and in fact, I went and looked at a lot of different mills and about buying them and holdings, but made my calculations, and I could see we had about 20 years supply. But by closing, it was a closed corporation, by closing it out and not have to pay anything on the stock, taxes and stuff, they'd be well ahead. And that's what they did. And I sold, you have to get rid of all your assets. I got rid of all the assets. The mill I sold to Portland Manufacturing, was the parent corporation of Montana Forest Products. I sold it to them for $1. And they had to tear it all down and get rid of everything. But we couldn't have any assets left. Our tugboats and that, I made deals with the skippers and sold them to that. And then I sold in Oregon and Washington, you had to brand each log. Well, a lot of logs got out of our rafts and stuff, and somebody would find a log with our brand on them. Then
Like on the Columbia or out in the
yeah,
Pacific?
on the Columbia, the Willamette, or anywhere, we'd have an asset. So that took a little thought, and so I decided that the best way to get rid of that was sell all the brands. So I sold all the brands mostly to tugboat people who towed our rafts and stuff, and they could then pick up the deadheads, and they were there, see. One of them made a lot of money on that deal because I sold them to them for nothing, just enough to be legal. We'd put a lot of white pine in the White River there in Washington, and all the butt cuts had sunk down to the bottom. Well, they put divers down and hooked them and brought them all out, and they made a lot of money all those. So they did well, and all the boys that I dealt with did well. So.
And timber, we're in the 50s. There's a big boom in construction.
58.
Timber was very strong in those days, right?
Timber was strong. Well, I wouldn't say it was strong compared to what it was before. It had almost doubled in 58. And that's when my loggers...
From the previous year?
Yeah. Just like that. And I forget what made it go so strong, but probably housing boom. But anyway, I had a deal that I worked with all my loggers, whereas they didn't bid on a job or anything. I told them what I'd pay for the job. We built the roads and that. So, but if the market picked up during that year, then they got a big bonus, and they shared that bonus with their people. And I never had to look for a logger. But I got rid of all Stebco.
So you were in most of 1959. You were kind of putting yourself out of a job.
Well, I sold my job.
Liquidating the company.
I liquidated the company. As Bill Calkins said to me, he says, I never saw a man that sold his job like you did. You sold your job. But it was only fair, but the company was paying me good and treating me real good. That's when I knew that Dwayne Otson, that's Portland Manufacturing, was building this mill over here. But I hadn't paid any attention to it at all. But when I sold him the mill, and I was out of a job and just loafing, you might say. Well, the company treated me good. So he asked me if I would come over here and look and see what was going wrong.
Now this is Dwayne
Otson.
How do you spell that?
A-U-T-S-E-N, I believe.
And
I'm not sure of that.
He was based in Portland.
Yeah, he's the president of the Portland Manufacturing, which is a parent corporation of Montana Forest Products. And they had 5 mills, a box factory, 2 plywood plants. Tom Otson, their father, was the man who invented the plywood. And but Dwayne...
Didn't he get a small amount for every sheet of plywood or something?
He got a nickel a sheet.
And added up to millions.
Millions. Because people like Weyerhaeuser knows, you know. But anyway, Dwayne approached me and he says, would you go over to Philipsburg? Well, I'd been in Montana, but never this far south.
Let's hold it right there for a second. I just want to check this. Okay, 1959.
1959, December. Around, I guess it's around the 1st of December or somewhere in there, before Christmas. No, it was later than that. It was around the 15th. Dwayne approached me and asked me if I'd come over and see what was wrong here. Spent $1.8 million and the ground, nothing doing.
They'd spent $1.8 million?
And nothing, well, they'd hauled a lot of big rock and that, but nothing was leveled, nothing was built. They were starting to build on the big building they just tore down. They had a shop up.
So let's set the scene here. Kennedy's just been elected president. Would it have been? 59, just before 60?
Yeah, it must have been, because I was here.
And you, when you drove over, you would have taken, what, 12 all the way over from Portland?
Yeah.
How long did that take you to drive?
Well, we drove through in a day.
In a day?
Well, when he said, well, his woodsman or timber manager was Whitey Howard. Well, now, Whitey and I are, because we're meeting all the time and interacting at all sales and stuff, and we're good drinking buddies. And well, I says, Whitey ain't doing nothing. If Whitey goes with me, I'll go. But otherwise, I really wasn't interested. And okay. So Whitey and I jumped into, we had a big station wagon. We only got 2 tickets coming over. But we got 3 going back. But we got into T-Burg. It was probably 3:30 or so in the afternoon, maybe 4 o'clock.
So you left really early and drove all the
Oh, we left about, I suppose, 3 o'clock or something. Probably just as soon as we left the bar. Which is a fact. So we came over. I had the credentials and stuff, and to check the books and see just to see what. Well, we wanted to spend. We was going to spend a couple weeks here, just playing, and we were sitting in the club. Shift changed, the mill and the mines changed at almost the same time, and the club filled up, and we're sitting there having a drink, and fella comes in and waves his hand and shouts, "As long as I'm here, the drinks are on Montana Forest Products." So that's good. So Whitey and I have another drink because they're paying us anyway. And then I said, "Whitey, let's go up the next one up the street." That was the White Front. Went up there and I asked a fellow in there, was Dolly Andre, I didn't know at that time who he was, where was a good place to eat. And he says, "Well, the Echo Lake Lodge is open yet. It's late for them to be open, but they're open yet. And they have good meals." So Whitey and I went up there. But while I was in White Front, the same thing. We went to pay for our drinks. No, they're paid by Montana Forest Products. Well, that seems strange. And so we went up to Echo, and we had lobster, and nice big 16-ounce lobster, and visited and went to pay, and no, it's paid for. Now, nobody knew us from Adams Sauce Fox in this town. And we were staying in the hotel down here.
Courtney. In the Courtney?
The one, the museum there. And we talked it over. I said, "I think maybe, Whitey, I should go down tomorrow instead of just snooping around much, and just get the books and look at them."
But you didn't say who paid for your dinner at Echo Lake.
Oh, Montana Forest Products. They were big wheelers and dealers. So I went down the next day and walked in and give my credentials, and I said, "I want to check the books." So they brought the books out to me, and I was looking and going down the name, salaried people on Montana Forest Products. Some of them were getting only $600 a month. Expense account, $3,000, $5,000. I couldn't believe it. So I made a few notes, and I told Whitey, "I guess we better go back to Portland." So we went back to Portland, and I presented him to what I'd found out and told him what was going on. Well, before we left, we walked over all the land out there, and I asked the fellow, I see the ground wasn't level enough to put a mill on. I asked the fellow who was their prime contractor, he was there, and I says, "Where's your benchmark? Where'd you shooting this stuff off of?" Well, he says, "It's around here somewhere." So they had a little shop built there, and he walked over to the shop, picked up a piece of cement with a piece of rebar in it. Here's our benchmark. Took it horse down. I laughed. I thought, no. But so we went back to Portland, and I told Dwayne, and Dwayne asked me if I would go back and straighten it out. And I said, yeah, if I go back tomorrow, because I think all the money would be spent before I get back.
How did it get so out of control? How did they not know what was going on?
He had his brother-in-law here run it, who knew absolutely nothing. He was a gigolo, had married his sister, and they hired a prime contractor who had a cleaning service in Portland, cleaning houses and that kind of stuff. And he was the prime contractor. But it was, well, they called in his brother Tom, and Tom's, oh, we better wait, we better not get too excited, this and that, and but I said, it don't matter to me. I says, Bill Birkenfeld, Bill was one of my big loggers, and I said, Bill's got a chunk in his, what's Bill say? He's got a third. Well, Bill's in the hospital, they said. Oh, to gosh. I said, Bill's in the hospital. We'll go see him. What's wrong with him? Oh, he's got kidney stones. So we went over to the hospital, Dwayne and I, and Tom. I saw Bill, and he was tickled to death. He's an old German fellow. Him and I always drank a fifth of scotch when we checked his books. And he says, he was tickled to see me. What'd you find out? What'd you find out? So I told him, and I said, Dwayne wants me to go back, and Tom kind of opposed to it this quick because their brother-in-law's there running the thing and that. And, oh, Billy raised up in bed and he says, I tell you one thing, Hudson's. Better go back tomorrow, or I buy you out, or you buy me out. It was just that simple with him, you know. So that's how I got here in Philipsburg.
What was it like then? What was it when you first came?
Well,
how much traffic was there in town? And
we had a lot of fellows hired, and the mine had about 250.
How many at the mill, do you remember?
Oh, at that time at the mill there was probably 100 or less. But they were also logging, and they didn't have the mill. They were hauling logs in. And so there was probably 150 there then. So I flew over and we landed out at Johnson's on the hay pasture there on the meadow, and they came over from the mill and picked me up, and son-in-law, brother-in-law asked me, he says, well, we're going to leave tomorrow, will you wait? He knew what I was going to do. Dwayne called him, because I told him if I come, I can't everybody that works directly for Montana Forest Products. Some of them I'll hire back probably, but I don't know. So I set my suitcases down, and they, oh God, I wish I could remember his name. Never cared much for him, but
this was the brother-in-law.
yeah, he said, don't embarrass us. I said, I ain't gonna embarrass you. I walked downstairs and where the office was, and I said, I want every person who was on works for Montana Products, salaried people here. I want them all here.
That was basically everybody in the office, all the supervisory people.
Oh,
None of
everybody.
the line guys that are making hourly wages.
No. Just the superintendents and that. And they had a lot of them. So they all came into the office down the stairs, and I looked at them and I says, "You're all fired. You want me to explain to you why I fired you? I certainly will. Because I got it right here in front of me." Nobody said anything, and I said to the woodsman, I said, "I'd like for you to stay on, show me where the woods is, but then you're fired. Because you've been bringing logs in here, costing, that are going to be rotten before the mill is done, so you could stay or leave." So, well, he stayed a couple weeks, but then there was a big, they had he was a millman, and he was from Redmond, Oregon. I believe he's a big Swede. I knew him from Oregon, and I said, "You're going to stay." But I kept on, there was a scaler there. I kept him on, and I kept all the office staff, of course.
Secretaries.
Secretaries, they had nothing to do with this, you know.
So how many people did you actually fire, you think?
Let's see. I'll have to think on that. There was probably 20, and that's counting the prime contractor. And
with the benchmark?
his boys. I fired them right quick. And he said I couldn't fire him. I said, "No, I've read your contract, and but," I said, "You see that railroad track out there? And the mill's the other side of that. You can stay on this side of the railroad track. I never want to see you across that track." Well, of course, he sued us, which I knew he was going to do. Well, about that time, the fellow had the contract, heard what was going on, had the contract putting up the big building. So he says, "I'd like to talk to you a little." So I say, "Okay." He says, "You know that prime contractor? He wants me to give him $10,000. And he's a bit, either that or he says he's going to get rid of me." I said, "You got any proof of that?" And he said, "I got people that heard it." "Fine." I says, "We'll need you in court." Because I knew he was going to sue. So he sued us, and we went to court, and of course, he was sued out like that because he knew nothing about building a mill or anything else. People should have been fired, to the Hotsons who hired him. But they were friends or something. But anyway,
Well, you must not have been very popular in Philipsburg for a while.
I was the most hated man in town. Yeah, that's for sure.
That was the end of a lot of free drinks at the club.
But I tell you, it was well worth it. Then the people started to realize that, hey, now something's getting done. More people are being hired, so construction is going on. So then the mines were gradually closing. So anything one of these miners could do, well, I was hiring them, see. Well, that feelings picked up pretty good after a bit.
What about your personal life then? Were you single? Were you,
Oh, no, I was
you had-
married.
So did you have kids in a family that had to come over and
Oh yeah,
go to school? And,
yeah. I had to bring them over, and I lived in the office that winter, and then come spring, after the kids got out of school, then I rented that middle house up there, a big brick house on the hill. There was 3 brick houses up there. I rented that middle one, and we moved into there. By that time, I'd bought this property here, and from Gus McDonald, and I'd made friends with people like Lit DuPont, who was down on the Rockin' Chair Ranch, and Bill Vitor Sr., and I had a lot of ranch friends, and so then Lit came to me. He said, I'm going to sell you my house. I said, Lit, I can't afford your house. I've been in his house a lot of times, you know. That's the lodge up here. Well, he says, there's a catch to it. And I says, what's the catch? He says, you got to move it. Well, I said, can we move it? I don't know, but you're the only damn fool I know would try it. That's what he said. So Lit and I got busy, and we finally found a fella from Spokane that would move it, and we moved that up there the next winter. We had to wait till the ground froze. In fact, it was February, about 30 below, but still we had to put plates down to come across the fields out there. It was that heavy. There's 2 big fireplaces and stuff in it that I think it weighed 120,000 pounds or something like that. Or maybe it was tons, I don't know.
so how old were your kids when they came over? Are they pretty young?
Pretty young. Mike was the oldest. Wendy was the youngest. I think Mike was probably in first grade. He went to school in Tualatin, and he probably in 3rd or 4th grade, and Jim was somewhere there, and then the other kids were down below that. But they all graduated from school down here, and they all turned out good. And we had a hell of a good school then, and we got a good school now. And Tony Johnson, he was a teacher there at that time, and he didn't put up with no stuff. But it was, it was good. Well, we got the mill going, and got it on 2 shifts, and started making some money. And as soon as we started making money, that was probably in 63, 4. Once the order come to shut her down. And we had enough timber purchased for 10 years or better with roads in it. And then mostly Forest Service timber. We had, I forget how many millions of feet in the Forest Service. In those days, I wouldn't look at a sale that was under 10 million. Let some logger buy that. But,
10 million board feet is how many acres typically of timber?
You could figure if it's lodgepole, our average lodgepole runs about 7,000 feet per acre. So it's a lot of acreage. We had, let's see, if I can remember them all, there was Mud Lake, there was Meadow Creek, that was, I think, around 30 million. Green Canyon, that was a big sale too. They were all They run from 10 to 30 million board feet. And then over on, we had horse meadows on Wise River, and then another one that was further up the big hole there. Oh, I forget the name of the creek. I logged the Wise River one, but I never finished, was able to finish any of the sales we had here.
Those are all old growth?
Old growth timber.
When you arrived here in the late 50s, were there more trees on the hills or fewer trees than you see today? How's it changed? They're just around Philipsburg.
Philipsburg, there's more trees. A lot more trees. That was at the forest was old everywhere. Let's see, we had, gosh, I forget all the different sales we did have. And then we had sales from the state land and the Bureau land and private, and we was logging 60 million feet a year is what it was logging. We cut an average of 100,000 a shift is what we cut. And there were 2 shifts at 200,000, you might say, a day. So it took a lot of logs. I think we had around 42 trucks running.
And then, out of the blue, they said, close it?
Mm-hmm. Close it. And that's exactly why they came after me. They saw what I had done with Stebco, and they wanted to do the same thing with their holdings.
Another tax dodge.
Uh-huh.
So these are very, very wealthy guys?
Oh, more money than they know what to do with.
Old money, or did they make it in?
Most of it was made by their dad, old money. But because Tom had set up the Watson Foundation Fund, where all these nickels went to. So, but
There's nickels from plywood.
yeah, but they ran up against the wrong fellow. They even tried to buy me off, but that didn't work either. And we set up a group here to buy the mill to keep it going, but they refused to sell it to us. It was no, but I just couldn't see when 315 people working, mostly families, and to close it down, no, I wasn't about to do that. But it was, they closed it anyway and tore it all down, and the last of it was the big building. And they made sure that when they did, that there wasn't enough left, you could buy enough to put a mill together. They cut up even the conveyor troughs into 10-foot sections, and the conveyors themselves, just so you couldn't put it back together. They wanted to lose as much money as they could on it. That was their idea, so they could write it off against the foundation money, see, the Watson Foundation money. And they also got rid of all their other mills and stuff at the same time. Yeah, there was several thousand people that lost their jobs, and
Because of tax policy.
yeah, and they. But I wanted no part of it, and
So you'd been here roughly 6 years running the mill?
no,
From 59?
yeah, approximately. It would have been about a good 5. In fact, I think a last I had anything to do with it was in '56, I believe, the first of '56, somewhere in there. But I forget. Yeah.
So what happened after that, Ep? You didn't have a mill to run.
Well, people had come in, like the Townsend Lumber Company, come in and they bought the planer. And they wanted me to go over and set the planer up for them, which I did. And then they wanted me to stay on as a lumberman, and I stayed over there for probably a year and a half, but it's just too much traveling back and forth, and I got tired of that. And about that time, that's when I opened up the outfitting business and run that for 17 years. And
So really, you had a much longer stint doing that than you did running the mill here.
oh, heck yes. Oh yeah, that was nothing but fun, you know. Met a lot of good people, and they're still good friends that I have all over the United States.
When you started that, were you worried that you couldn't make a living at it?
No. Because, you know, actually you run about, except your summer business, which is fishing, which is doesn't amount to nothing, 5 weeks. But I was busy doing cruising timber and running lines and that, and then mining. I had got some placer claims out on Willow Creek, and I worked those from about 80, I suppose, to 90 or something like that. Oh, there was always there was plenty to do around here if a fellow wanted to do it. It's one thing that I was busy all the time. But,
How is it that those buildings ended up being what they call LP?
well, see,
That's Louisiana Pacific.
yeah, Louisiana Pacific. Louisiana put a stud mill, I believe it was, down here. And for that, another northern timber or something, well, if it put in a little scrag mill and stuff there. Then LP came in and bought that out and put in a stud mill. And then they ran that, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years, and then they started over in Deer Lodge and moved over to Deer Lodge. LPC, I made third-party agreements with them on the Forest Service timber we had, so that's where they had the timber resource in to operate with when they came.
They picked up the timber rights that you'd purchased.
Yeah.
But they cut that timber in Deer Lodge, most of it.
A lot of it went to Deer Lodge. They cut quite a bit down here, but most of it went to Deer Lodge.
So the family of the man who invented plywood built a mill here, employed up to 350 people, and closed it just for tax purposes.
Yeah. But he was dead then. His family did that to him.
Did you know him personally?
Yeah, I knew Tom. Yeah, he was a nice man. Loved the lumber business. And he grew up the hard when the timber was tough.
Depression? And...
Yeah. Well, you know, it was tough down here. Our average price to and better lumber was, we averaged $62 FOB mill.
That's 1,000.
Uh-huh.
So what would it be today?
Oh, hell, it's 400 or something. Yeah. But on the other hand, I was working with $1.50 stumpage or 50-cent stumpage too. And I was paying my loggers.
Can you explain that? The stumpage of what the...
Oh, stumpage is what you pay for it on the, when it's growing per 1,000 board feet.
You pay 50 cents to $1 for something that was worth 68?
60, yeah, around 68, 62.50 after it was manufactured. Had to haul it in here and
Cut it, haul it, cut it up, sell it.
See, we had this stumpage, and we built the main line and secondary roads for the loggers. Now the loggers, they cut them down and hauled it to the mill, and they got $35 a thousand. And of course, in those days, we had a good overrun in the mill. Our overrun was running around 50%, but
which means
that for every 1,000 feet of logs came in, I got 150,000 board feet of lumber out of it.
how'd you do that?
Well, it's simply done by having the correct saws and manufacturing it properly. See, there in decimal C scale, there's a 10% overrun built into that scale, which you scale your logs on, and it's based on a 1/4-inch kerf. Well, if you got an 1/8-inch kerf, see how much lumber you're saving, see? And then if you got your edgers and things, and a resaw, you can pick up more. But it worked well, and as I say, we was making money. And
Did any of those guys that you fired ever become friends of yours? Or did they all go away?
oh, I guess they all went away. They didn't stay here anyway. No. But I didn't care whether they were friends or not.
I just wondered, it's quite a story for
Oh,
your turnaround guy.
well, they call you the hatchet boy. Yeah, it was a nice experience. And but to see the people working for me and see their families and stuff, and see them start improving the town and stuff. Yeah.
That must have been an exciting part of your life.
Oh, yeah, it was good. And then when the grand opening, when the governor was here, and that was the first big parade and everything. That started all this parade business for.
That was the origin of Flint Creek Valley.
Yeah.
Well, you know, we've got an hour of tape here, so I think what we'll do is wrap this up, and then we'll figure out what our topic is for the next hour of tape. But not this time, but we'll get set up
Next
for.
year.
Okay.
Okay.
Is there anything else you want to?
No. That's,
Good. Well,
that's enough.
That was good.
Was that?
You flow really well. Hang on, I'll shut this down.